1, and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And now it looks like we are live. Hi, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, joined as always by Jay Campbell. Very, very interesting program for you tonight. I'm not that well versed in gematria, don't know that much about numerology, but I watched a video by our guest tonight, and I was all ears. I sat there for 45 minutes, glued to every word. Jay said, let's get this guy on. I said, how soon can we do it? And boom, here we are. Very, very happy to have Zach Hubbard with us tonight. Jay, you know a little bit more about Zach's work. Why don't you introduce him to our great and growing audience?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to everybody out there. We appreciate you guys. I know it's growing, it's getting bigger. The Decoders of Truth group is, really resonating with our recent guests. And as I put this video, somebody sent me your video, Zach, about, I don't know, when you literally a couple hours after you made it. Oh, I know who it was. It was Sean Behrendt in our little inner circle in the WhatsApp group. So Sean, shout outs to Sean. And she's like, Jay, you got to watch this. And, we all, in the age of information today, all of us are overwhelmed with, check this out, watch this. And so she pinged me like 3 times and she's like, Jay, you need to listen to me. You need to watch this. I don't care what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. So anyway, I started watching it and I had a total meltdown. I started sending it to other people, many of which are in the Decoders of Truth. Of course, I sent it to Jeff. I sent it to some other people. Even my wife caught me. I was in the middle of work and I was watching it and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I had no words. So anyway, with all that said, it's awesome to have you on here today, Zach. I really appreciate it. I literally left Zach a text message, or not a text message, but a comment in his YouTube thread. And I said, hey man, we would love for you to come on the show. And of course he emailed us like within an hour and here he is today, man. So I don't want to talk very much. I don't know that much about gematria either. I know you're the obviously expert on it, but it was so fascinating what you were able to decode with the bushes. Now, listen, everybody on this show, for the most part, Zach, knows that, things are not as they seem. So, I want you, if you can, to just give us a super, super high level, summary analysis of like what you think is going on in this matrix, this decoded, mathematical reality that we're existing in.
Okay, so what's taking place? Okay, so let's just start here. We're talking about George Herbert Walker Bush, who was a member of Yale's Skull and Bones, and I imagine a lot of your listeners know that they identify by a number, 322. Tim Russert once asked George W. Bush and John Kerry in 2004 on Meet the Press what they could reveal about the number 322, since both of them were a member of Skull and Bones. And you can look this up. Tim Russert ended up dropping dead at age 58, and it was reported that he died at 2:23 in the afternoon.
They sure did.
That in the
I remember that interview, Zachary. I remember that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, they were technically 2 separate interviews because he had both of them during the campaign trail, and he asked both of them, and both of them said, "Well, it's a secret society. It's a secret." And
yeah, I remember Kerry laughing it off. He handled it a little bit better than Bush did, but they both are clearly uncomfortable.
Right. So those might have been mistaken questions by Tim Russert because he died on vacation with his son, from what I understand. So, and you can look this up. George Herbert Walker Bush, when his body just landed at Andrews Air Force Base, it supposedly landed at 3:22 in the afternoon. At least that's how it was reported in the media. Whether these things are happening to the minute or they're just reporting it that way, I'll leave that up to your listeners' imagination. But the thing about this number 322 is it goes to Genesis 322. Genesis 3:22 speaks about the tree of life and knowing good and evil. And what the tree of life is in reference to Kabbalah. If you're not familiar with Kabbalah, it's old world mysticism. It's credited to the Jewish spirituality. It's now spread into all spiritualities of the world. But the tree of life, it's the physical model for Kabbalah. And there's a good side to Kabbalah and there's an evil side, just like Genesis 3:22 speaks to. The good side's about understanding the nature of the world, how God operates, how we operate within God's world. The other side is also about understanding the world, but it can also be used for, what people would describe as like satanic witchcraft, hurting other people. And in Kabbalah, there's this belief there's a text out there you can pick up. It's called the Book of Formation, and very short text, actually. You can get it on Amazon. It's funny, it used to just be $5 for many years until recently. They just jacked the price way up. But this Book of Formation is very short, and in the opening paragraph, it says, God created the world. So you just have to start the book and just read the first paragraph. God created the world by merging the letter with the number with the word.
Right.
So that's where this concept of gematria comes in, which is also pronounced gematria or gematria. There's multiple ways it's pronounced. But what it means is geometry in language. Geometry in language. It's the belief that you've probably studied sacred geometry a little bit, learned about the mathematical patterns that show up in so many things, from our ear to so many other living species in this world. So there's this belief that God's this master mathematician. He works through geometry. He makes his creation through geometry. And that's also where gematria comes into play, because gematria means geometry and language. And with regards to the Holy Bible, Holy's 4 letters, Bible is 5 letters. So 4 letters, 5 letters. In gematria, Holy Bible sums to 45. And 45 is the 9th triangular number, meaning if you add 1 through 9, it equals 45. Rather than teach you about Bible numerology, just understand these numbers are specific, and they're even coded into the text. And if you learn this coded gematria, you can just see how many verses are scripted with mathematical reasoning, such as Genesis 3:22. The verse in gematria sums to 322, and not by accident. That's in the King James Version and the New International Version, both versions. And something else that's really interesting about 322 is if you write out Abrahamic religions. For people out there, understand that there's 4 crucial ciphers that you want to know. There's really a lot more than that, but there's 4 that you have to know. One's the alphabetic order. A is 1 up to Z, the 26th letter is 26. Another cipher is just flipping the alphabetic order around, making Z1, counting back to A is 26. And then the other 2 ciphers are using those same orders and incorporating numerology. But when you flip the alphabetic order around, making Z1 back to A is 26, if you write out Abrahamic religions, which is Judaism, Christianity, Islam, sums to 322. And if you write out ancient mystery religions, which includes Kabbalah, Hermeticism, alchemy, Kundalini, these are all things that are important to secret societies and Masonry. Ancient mystery religions, when you flip the alphabetic order around, is 322. And no doubt, this is where the significance of the number comes from. Out of the ancient mystery religions, they're all significant, but it is Kabbalah that's front and center. A lot of your listeners have probably heard the term the Cabal. They might even use that term. That term is derived from Kabbalah. The story is that the Knights Templar recovered this code and brought it back to the Catholic Church at the end of the Crusades, and it slowly spread through the elites, the royal families that were in that world at the time. And that's kind of how these powerful organizations came to be over time. Just like how we know, the presidents and many of our powerful politicians and CEOs, et cetera, are related to these royal bloodlines and whatnot. But with regards to the Knights Templar, to bring this back to George Herbert Walker Bush, that's kind of how we started, the symbolism of skull and bones, that skull and those crossbones above the 322 in their logo, that comes from the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar would bury their dead in an ossuary, which is a box. And what you would do is you would decompose a human body. So you'd dig a shallow grave, you'd let the body rest in there until it decomposed, and then you'd come back and you'd collect the bones, and you'd place them in a significant order in this box known as the ossuary, and you would finish by putting the femurs as crossbones at the top, and then the skull right on top, the longest bones in the body, and then the skull. And what's really interesting is when you write out the word ossuary, it sums to 118. When you write out the number 41 as a word, so you're spelling out 41, F-O-R-T-Y, etc., 41 sums to 118. Herbert Walker was number 41, of course. And if you write out George Herbert Walker Bush, use the alphabetic order numerology, it also sums to 118. And earlier this year on September 4th, 9/4, like how he was 94 years old, he was honored for his 1,000 points of light speech.
Right.
And that day leaves 118 days left in the year, not by accident. You can go back in time and you can look at the death of his father, Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush died 118 days after Herbert Walker's birthday and 94 days after George W. Bush's birthday. And you can go through all of the deaths in this family's history and see the rhyme and reason to why they died the day they did in light of this code. I'd been saying since the death of McCain that no doubt we would see HW die at age 94, and I said multiple times before he died that he wouldn't make it past the month of November. And what's funny is I got heavy trolling on my channel on November 29th. Heavy trolling that he had not died yet.
And I actually went back and watched that, and you did say it. It is on record. You did predict it. Yeah.
And I said to those people, I said, well, November's not over yet. And something that jumped out to me right away when HW died on November 30th, consider just that date's 11/30, 11 plus 30 is 41. Well, as soon as he died that day, what I started to think about, well, I'd actually covered it in my podcast that morning before he even died. I reminded people that Paul Walker, the actor, had died that day in history. And the reason that mattered was because Paul Walker's first film was Skulls, about Skull and Bones. And I was made fun of by friends and family the day he died because I already knew Gematria then. And I showed how 11 plus 30 was 41 and Skull and Bones equaled 41 when you wrote out the alphabetic order at the rules of numerology. And in the film, he drove a red Porsche. Right. And he died in a red Porsche. And his name's Paul Walker, which has to remind everybody of George Walker and Herbert Walker, the Skull and Bones members who were in the presidency. And the other thing about him dying in 2013, Paul Walker, is 41 is the 13th prime number. And 41 is a special number to this nation, too. USA, just very simple gematria, use the 21st letter. S is the 19th, A is the first. So USA adds up to 41. 41 is the 13th prime. Think about how the nation began with 13 colonies, 13 stripes on the flag, 13 years of public school programming, something I often remind people about. So anyway, this is a little taste of gematria and what's going on. But my understanding of what's taking place in the world, when I first came onto this, I thought, wow, these people are weird. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing everything by numbers? This just seems so silly and nonsensical. And, oh, okay, there's a belief that God created the world this way. So, okay, they're trying to play God by this belief system. Well, then one day I got the bright idea to say, okay, let me apply this code to my own life. I'd read in a numerology book that if you decoded your name, taking the alphabetic order and the rules of numerology, which is considered the most pure cipher, it's the same one that Manly P. Hall recommends in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. It's the same one that the author Faith Giovanni's written several books about. Supposedly, if you decode your name and understand your birth numerology, you'll get these numbers that are so important to you. And then if you pay attention to these numbers, you'll see how they resonate with other people in your life, from your parents to your special loved one, your spouse, your children, et cetera, et cetera. And I read this and I thought, this sounds like a bunch of hocus pocus to me. So I just decided to do it. So I decoded I thought, okay, if this is true, I'm going to decode my mother, my father, and myself. There has to be something there based on what I'm reading. So I decode my father's full name. I decode my mother's full name. I decode my full name. And what I noticed right away is my father's name and mine are the exact same. Not only that, but our birth numerology is the exact same too. And I thought, wow, that's something. Now, my mother's name was slightly different, but all the numbers between us all broke down to the same single digit, which was 8. So for example, my father's full name summed to 89. My full name sums to 89. My mother's name sums to 62, right? And all 89 in numerology is 8 plus 9 is 17. Yep. 17 is 1 plus 7 is 8. 62 is 6 plus 2 is 8. So when I saw the 89s, I said, okay, my mom's name is not the same, but my mom's birthday is September 8th. And in the majority of the world, that date's written 8/9. And then the only thing that my dad kept from the day I was born, or is this in my scrapbook, my baby book that my mom has put together, my dad took the newspaper clipping from the next day because that headline clipping, I mean, this is back in the 80s, so we didn't have the internet and instant news and everything. But the clipping was that the day I was born, July 21st, 1983, was the coldest recorded day in the history of recordings. And it still is, actually, if you look it up. If you go to Google and type in what's the coldest recorded day in history, it'll come up as my birthday. And the temperature was negative 89 Celsius, right? So it's this number again. It's 89. And then what's a trip is 89 is it's a Fibonacci number. It's the 11th Fibonacci number. The next Fibonacci number is 144. And from my parents' birthdays, or from my dad's birthday to my mom's birthday, which comes later in the year, is 144 days later. So, yeah, and I could go on and on. My sister's birthday, my birthday's July 21st. Her birthday's December 7th, which is tomorrow. And if you write out 7/21 and you write out 12/7, you'll realize they're perfect reflections of each other. So anyway, I just started looking at this, and I could tell you a whole bunch more, but I've written a book, and the last chapter is about the organic side of code. So a lot of people have learned about this and applied it, and they call into my radio show every week and they say, look at what I observed about this. So there absolutely is some organic side to this that we're not manipulating, we're not controlling, it's just happening. But no doubt the world elite are aware of this, and it seems that what they're trying to do is manipulate the code or exploit the code, such as, making sure it's reported that Mr. 322's plane touched down at 3:22 in the afternoon. And, there is still a small part of me that goes, could everything I'm predicting and seeing coming before it happens, could it all be organic? But as I'll explain, like a lot of times these news stories, which are obvious propaganda, they'll use these absolutely absurd names where you're just like, wait a minute, who spells the name like that?
Right.
And the reason they did that is because the numbers perfectly sync up with what the subject of the story is. And the date numerology. So I see that they're exploiting this code, but no doubt at the same time, there really is some organic side. And that must be where the pure Kabbalah study originally came from, understanding that, God is working through numbers and somehow they're showing up in our lives. So,
Zach, let me throw a couple of weird things at you. Talking about before we leave the bushes, 1986, late 1986. I'm in Frankfurt, Germany. I'm in the Air Force. Bush 41 is now vice president to Reagan. We're working on his plane. I'm literally covered in grease up to my elbows, covered in grease. He walks by, we salute. He comes up and starts shaking everybody's hand. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, I'm covered with grease. He says, I don't care. Grabs my hand, shakes it, all covered up with grease, gets himself greasy. A few years later, I'm working for Pat Buchanan, and we're at the Iowa caucuses, and Pat's giving his speech, and I'm standing in the back. I feel this bump, and it's Governor Bush then at that time looks at me and says, "You're betting on the wrong horse." They seem like such great guys, but yet, how do you? Does that surprise you?
Hey, Zach, before you answer, I just want to add something to this. So one of the things in me cyber stalking you a little bit, and by the way, I bought your book and I've read like 60 pages. And I will read the whole thing. By the way, guys, this book is insanely good, and it's 800 pages, and he sells it for $5, which is, good on you, bro. You should sell it for more. After I watched another one of your videos and cyberstalked you, and then looked through a little bit of your book, read as much as I read, dude, I almost had an epiphany. Like I started to shake. I had all the hairs on my arm stand up because George W. Bush is a mind-controlled Gematria stooge. And all that time I'm watching this guy when I'm, back then, and I wasn't as aware as I am now, I was like, what is going on? This guy is half retarded. And he's the president of the United States. Something is up. Anyway, your thoughts.
Okay, so I'm going to answer the questions in the order they came. Okay. I agree. They seem like they're personable people. They seem like they're likable people. What it makes me think of is when I was younger, I used to work in a group home. And I got to meet children who are truly clinically diagnosed as sociopaths, even though they're at a young age. And it has to do a lot with the upbringing they had because they've experienced all this horrible trauma.
Right.
And so I got to see these children in their worst moments, on their worst days. And I also got to see them on their best days. And when you meet them in their best days, you think they're an ordinary child. They're great. They're smiley. They're happy. They want to play. But you meet them on their worst days and you're like, wow, I can't believe this is a child. And they're already advanced this far. And honestly is they're evil. You know, it's just amazing.
Yeah, you might end up dead on the worst day, right?
These children literally would kill you.
Yes.
You know, the reason they're in the group home is because they couldn't survive in foster care because they were murdering all the pets. They were stabbing the parent. They were setting the house on fire.
Right.
So, you know, and when you're sociopathic, you do have a lot of control over yourself. There's things that will trigger you and you'll lose control. But I mean, you can present well. You know, you can deceive your audience. So and I imagine that these people growing up in these families, like Herbert Walker and Walker, I imagine they're victims of what they were born into.
MK Ultra.
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
MK Ultra, all of it.
Right. So it's like you have to realize that they're victims and perpetrators at the same time, just like the children that I work with.
Yes.
And it is what it is. So that's how I'd say they could be so personable and great, and also, you know, participate in the things that they do.
Right.
And for anybody who wants to check out my channel, I talked about some of the evil that these people have been a part of. But
and I put your link in a couple of times, so make sure you subscribe to Zach's channel.
Yeah, you guys, make sure you smash it. And by the way, everybody's if you haven't liked this video, because it's amazing. Continue, Zach.
So your next part of your question, I was 17 years old when W was elected president, 2000. I wasn't yet old enough to vote, and I've honestly never voted because of that.
By the way, just so you know, and Jeff knows this, that's the only president I ever voted for.
Is that right?
I voted for George W. to beat Al Gore. Yes.
Okay. But you just said he seemed like he was retarded.
Dude, I did not know that he was that retarded until he became president.
He did get worse. He got worse. You're right.
There's no question he got
worse.
Let's
face it. I don't think Al Gore was going to be vying for a Mensa scholarship either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it wasn't for Al Gore, guys, we wouldn't be having this broadcast right now. But go ahead, continue.
Right. Al Gore created the internet. Right.
That's right.
Yeah, Al Gore was Mr. Robot. I remember. So I was a senior in high school when that was going on, and there was this class that I loved. I took it 3 times in my entire time in high school. Every time I had like an elective or an opening, I just took the same class over again. Used to have this teacher, Mr. Griffin, and the reason I loved this class is because there was no homework, there was no assignments. All we did was talked about what was going on in the world, and I just loved that. And so I was in that class in the run up to the election. And pretty much what we talked about that whole month was the election and the democratic process and all this. And I was living in Vancouver, Washington, a suburb of Portland, Oregon at the time.
I've lived there. That's weird.
Oh, okay. That's funny. Yeah, I went to Mountain View High School, if you know that place. But the whole month in the what's our paper there? I used to deliver it. How can I not remember? Oh, my goodness. The Columbian, like the Columbia River. That's the name of our paper down there. So in the Columbian for the whole month, it was just every day it was how it was going to come down to Florida. It was going to come down to Florida.
Right.
I was saying, okay, if they know for a month that it's going to come down to Florida, and that's where his brother's the governor, doesn't something seem wrong? It's like, why are we even voting then if they got it pegged this well? And I was skeptical that it was going to come down to Florida. I was like, how can they know it so well before? Yeah. But sure enough, it came down to Florida, right? And we had to watch the election, and they called it for Gore, and okay. And I was thinking, well, I wasn't surprised that Gore won because to me it seemed like Bush was this like schmuck, you know, son of the former president. So
a frat boy.
Exactly. I wasn't quite to the college age, but I understood what these frat boys were about. And so anyway, first Gore won, but then I don't know, it was 30 minutes later, an hour later, where they're like, well, wait a minute, we might have jumped the gun here. I was like, oh, this is strange. Okay. And I think it was the next morning that I woke up because it was late. You know, I got to get up early for school. And I woke up and the news had said, now Bush won. I said, okay, now this is getting weird. So it did come down to Florida. His brother's the governor there. This is looking all kinds of suspicious. His dad's the last Republican president. I was like, okay, I don't care what's going on. I obviously live in a land of kings and queens. And I understand it's a democratic republic, but there's obviously nothing democratic about this.
Right.
I used to even just wonder how, like, living out here on the West Coast, I don't know where you guys were. On the West Coast, it's like, do we even need to vote? Because usually they're calling the election before anybody's home from work.
Exactly.
So, and I'd always just think, like, how are they getting the results in so fast? I mean, somebody already tabulated all this, and they summed it up, and they got it to the news. And so anyway, you know, just watching that whole thing, I was on guard after that happened. I was like, I don't know about, you know, I'm getting older. My mind's growing. I'm just like, I don't know about this place I live in anymore. And nobody was really questioning it. You know, people were just kind of accepting it. I was thinking, you know, I've been told that I live in a country. I don't think I live in this country that I've been told I live in. So I was watching, and then 9/11 happened. I was just barely 18 years old. And I think I was, what was it? Not even 2 months into 18. I was having a great time. I was having the best time of my life. I was down in Arizona. I was at ASU, you know, living the stereotype.
Go Sun Devils.
Exactly. Chasing girls, having a great time. And then 9/11 happened. And I was like, wait a minute. This isn't adding up to me. They already know that it's a man in a cave. And so,
well, dude, you remember, just to interrupt you, the next day, every single newswire in the world had the whole story.
It was
the whole story was decoded the next day in all the newspapers.
And what did it take, a week or two to roll out TSA? I mean, come on.
People literally forget. Here we are, right? Like, this is our own Gematria effect right now. People forget that the entire story was in every single AP news outlet the next day, completely decoded.
Right.
We were being hypnotized, Zach, all of us culturally through the media to not even think that it was even something to question.
Right. So I was questioning it, and I found out real fast. I mean, I was down in pretty conservative Arizona. I found out real quick that people did not appreciate me questioning. I mean, I had people my age wanting to fight me.
At that time, I was still a supporter. I would have voted for the Patriot Act if it had been on the ballot. That's how lost I was.
I was questioning it too, Zach. When I watched the buildings collapse and implode, the first thing was like, that's a controlled demolition.
Yeah, because they kept showing it over and over on TV. So I'd probably seen it at least 200 times by September 12th. And every time I looked at it, I just thought, okay, that building hit the corner. There's a giant explosion out of the corner. If the infrastructure weakened there, shouldn't like the building tip? And
the whole thing was a holographic illusion. The entire thing.
So it wasn't making sense. And then the other thing in my mind was 911, National Emergency Dialing Code.
Yeah.
So I was like, there's got to be something to numbers. So I you know, my whole life went from, you know, partying and chasing girls to feeling like but you know, from a young age, I always had this thing, like I cared about justice and truth. And at that point in my life, my plan was I was on a scholarship for the accounting program at ASU. I was going to go to the accounting school and then go into law school. That was my path. Everything changed really because of 9/11. I started to just realize the whole thing was a joke. And all of a sudden, my new purpose was to expose that we had been lied to. And the other thing that was so personal to me is I almost took the path to joining the military. And I had a recruiter tell me that it was the perfect time to join because there'd probably never be another war in my lifetime. And had I taken that advice, I'd have been, you know, one of the first people shipped off. So, you know, this is the way I was thinking about it. And my new purpose in life was I'm going to figure out what really went on in this day because I realize I'm being lied to and there's all these shenanigans going on in the world. And all of a sudden, nobody wanted to talk to me. I was, you know, the man on the island because I was questioning this, and it was all I wanted to talk about. And literally, like everyone in my life hated me for it. So I started reading a lot of books and researching. And the internet wasn't as awesome then as it is now, but you could still find things. And it wasn't long after 9/11, from just digging, that I realized that in 1968. 911 was made the national emergency dialing code. World Trade Center construction began. And Bush had graduated from college. And I thought, and that was the same year he joined the Air Force, supposedly. So I thought, what are the odds of all of those things happening in the same year? And then the other thing I was really into was Building 7. I was like, nobody's talking about this Building 7, the third building that fell that day, 8 hours later in the day, where the BBC prematurely announced it had collapsed before it even had.
It had all the financial records from all of the secret space program.
All sorts of things. The Enron and WorldCom cases were going on at the time, and they said that building had the majority of the federal documents for that. And so it was like that building housed so much important information, and it was just gone in the blink of an eye. And then I was just doing more research, and I learned about the Project for a New American Century and how they called for this new Pearl Harbor. And I was like, wait a minute, New American Century? Beginning of the new century, a Pearl Harbor-like event. So I was just
Oh,
looking
you
at
guys
all-
are just conspiracy theorists. It all makes perfect sense.
right. Well, that's all anybody would ever say to me. And I was like, finally, I found a professor who talked to me a lot, and him and I had good conversations. And then I found this guy at a bookstore who was into it. And so I made some friends with some people who were like 30 years older than me, but nobody else that was my age wanted anything to do with me.
There were very few of us, dude. Wanderers, very few of us at that time. Very few.
Right. So for many years, I had this seed planted in my head that numbers were important, because then I realized that from 68, when all this stuff went down with 9/11 and the World Trade Center, to 2001 was 33 years later. I was like, okay, what's 33?
Wow.
Oh, it's important to masonry. And then I realized Space Odyssey 2001 had come out in that year.
Yep.
Just real quick on a tangent.
That's
I don't know if you
amazing.
guys did you catch that on 11/11, Joe Biden gave Bush I believe it was the Medal of Freedom on 11/11?
Yes.
So something that, the Julian calendar is the old calendar we're on. Now we're on the Gregorian calendar. That pretty much pushed us forward 2 months.
Right.
So 11/11 back in the Julian time would have been the 9th month, the 11th day.
Wow.
So what I noticed that day in the headlines, I noticed a lot of things. First of all, I noticed there was a massive fire in Seattle, and a lot of people don't know this, but the construction firm that built the World Trade Centers is from Seattle. Their name's Magnuson Klemenkic Associates. I've left so many voicemails there; they never get back to me. But also that day, Hal, the voice of the technology from 2001: A Space Odyssey, he dropped dead. And what's interesting is his name, Douglas Rain, the actor who played that voice. His name, Douglas Rain, equals 68. Like how that film came out in 68 and all that stuff went down in 68. By the way, the word terror equals 68. From Bush's birthday, July 6th to September 11th, every single year is a span of 68 days for one more.
That's W's birthday, right?
Yeah.
George W., his birthday is July 6th. Yeah, HW is June 12th, just like Rockefeller, the guy who put the money forward for the World Trade Center project.
Imagine that.
Yeah, both of them had those June 12th birthdays. And then they bury Bush today on December 6th, right? 12/6. Both days can be 12/6, June 12th, December 6th. Anyway, there's a whole riddle with that too. But on 11/11, all of these weird riddles went down. And something that nobody would ever catch without understanding this code is, Anthony Bourdain, how supposedly he committed suicide earlier this year?
Supposedly, allegedly.
That was June 8th, right? 6/8. So from his date of death to 11/11, which is when they aired the last episode of Parts Unknown, his show on CNN, a lot of people don't realize it was CNN. They were the first news network to break the planes, there was just a plane flying into the tower.
Yeah.
So CNN, that's their rule in 9/11. But that Anthony Bourdain show was on CNN, right? From the day he died, June 8th, to his last episode being broadcast, which was set in New York, his hometown, 11/11, that was 156 days later. And the reason that matters is if you write out 33 as a word, THIRTY, if you write it out in Gematria, it sums to 156. And 911 is the 156th prime number, right? 911 is the 156th prime. When you write out 33 with the alphabetic order, it's 156. All of this stuff went down in 68, 33 years before 2001. There's another cipher out there based on the old Latin order of the English letters, because I'm sure everybody knows that English came from Latin with a few extra letters added in and the order rearranged. But there's this cipher known as Jewish Gematria, and it's based on the Latin script. Tisha B'Av, which is to remember the destruction of the two temples, Solomon's Temple and Herod's Temple. Solomon's Temple is very important to Freemasonry. It's known as Tisha B'Av. And in Jewish Gematria, Tisha B'Av sums to 911. So think about that. To remember the destruction of the two temples, here's the destruction of the two towers, right? And also in Jewish Gematria, what's interesting is when you write out false flag, it sums to 156. And again, 911 is the 156th prime number. For one more piece on 33 and false flags, if you take the alphabetic order and the rules of numerology, false flag is also 33. So is masonry, so is secrecy, so is order, so is federal, so is bonesman. the alumni of Skull and Bones. So anyway.
Well, so Zach, let me just ask you this. So, I mean, obviously you've conclusively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, proved that, this Kabbalic numerology, manipulation of mathematical codes is how, very different groups of humans on this planet. Again, are they humans? That's where my question is going. So we know the elites, these Freemasons, the Illuminati, the royal bloodline families, whatever, are doing this. The question that I have, and just so you know, because I know you're not familiar with our show, Jeff and I have been doing a massive decoding of David Icke's profound dissertation, that he released at the beginning of this year. Jeff has it right now. Pull it up. I mean, Zach, if you have not read that book, you've got to read it, dude. It is unbelievable. But he's basically on the same path as you. Okay. But he's saying that who's the puppeteer behind all this is what he calls the archontic inversion, which he says is an AI that came here and corrupted everything, who knows when, but is essentially ruling from an AI construct this simulated reality, which clearly your mathematical breakdown and decoding is showing that we are in some sort of a mathematical reality, some of which is simulated, some of which may be organic, and maybe it's not. What is the end game?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't have the answer. It seems to me that maybe not the end game, but the current game is absolute world control.
Yes.
And getting people to submit to their agenda. And I think they're deep in the game because there's so few of us who are awake and even care. Almost nobody cares. And that's what's always killed me. I've heard so many theories. There's so many competing theories out there. There's David Icke's reptilians. And my buddy is real big on that theory. And my buddy who's very influenced by David Icke is also to thank for getting me re-inspired to investigate truth around the time that I figured out the thing with Gematria. What had happened, I'm a school teacher. I was teaching in 2012. It was the last year I taught. I was working in a school the day Sandy Hook happened. And I was working in a private school outside of Seattle, a lot of wealthy parents that work for Microsoft in the tech industry. And because there's a lot of stay-at-home moms, literally the school was almost empty before the school day was over because everyone was so terrified of what was taking place in the news that they wanted to come get their child out of school early. And I thought, come on, people, this is in Connecticut. Right. Your child's going to be fine. Let them finish the day. But anyway, that got me back on, okay, I hadn't seen people freak out so bad since 9/11 until the Sandy Hook thing. So anyway, I had this friend, sharing the work with David Icke and getting me into that. And then all this happened and it was this great motivation. What I'm trying to say is, all of this stuff has inspired me and made me investigate and look for truth. I do not know definitively what the end game is. Is it that they're using us and exploiting us until they finally achieve their master plan and then they want to clear us out? Coming back to 322, there's the Georgia Guidestones.
Right.
I'm sure you know about those that were put there on March 22nd.
500 million total population on the planet. Right.
I've been to them last Christmas time last year. I was there.
Yep. 500 million.
So I want to go there and check I have a video on the Georgia Guidestones and all that's encoded into it. But, 500 million, if it's true that there's 7 billion people on the planet right now, if you do the math on that, that means 13 out of 14 people have to go.
Go away. Yeah.
That's almost everybody. That's over 90% of the population. And
well, Zach, look at the USA. I mean, Jeff and I talk about this every show that we do. I mean, our show is called The Last Stand because we talk about we're the last generation of real human beings. They are moving us into this transmogrified, transhumanistic, whatever it is, AI, automatons, controlled, enslaved, fat, sick, dying. There's clearly an agenda. And again, that's the end of David Icke's book, which we haven't got to the end. We haven't fully decoded the book yet because we're still going through it. It's so big. It's 800 pages. But it's like your book, but that's what's happening. I mean, they're definitely pushing us to a full enslavement situation. And not to be negative, but to be positive, there are many of us like us who will not choose that, will not allow that. And so it becomes more of a spiritual essence or a spiritual game of like, okay, well, how do I get my soul right so that when I do get out of whatever is going on here, I don't have to come back.
Right.
Let me ask you a question, Zach, getting back to Gematria, a couple of questions. Number one, it's mind-boggling when I sit and I watch your videos and you go through and it's just one number connected to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. It's obvious that this is all done with forethought, with great intention. Now, I just can't figure out, are there guys sitting in a room putting this all together, or is the matrix built in such a way where it automatically happens according to all these crazy codes?
Great question.
So I do not have the answer to that question. I ask it myself. There are millions. It's obvious that this code is very important to Masonry and other Masonic secret societies. There's millions of people in these orders across the world. So there is a large enough network to achieve it. It is possible that it's people working together and making this carry out as it does. It's also possible in the day-to-day computers that they have an AI that's figured out how to essentially map out the system for them.
Exactly.
Which would probably be more logical.
Well, that's Ike's theory. It's a computer. It's an AI. It's a false AI. And he goes back to the Gnostic belief system of, the demiurge or Yaldabaoth or whatever you want to call it. But that's the corruption, and that's where all the holy books. That's where the corruption comes from.
Sure. Just to make the point about the computer and AI, Apple priced their first computer at 666. Right. And not by accident.
$666 was the first.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I have that computer still, and my mom has that in my house I grew up in. I had that computer. It's still sitting there. An Apple IIc. Yeah.
So there's a cipher where you multiply the alphabetic order times 6. So, just take each letter and multiply it times 6. Computer, internet, Genesis, they all end up having a value of 666. And think about the forbidden fruit from Genesis. And what's Apple's symbol? A bite out of an apple. So
exactly. Yeah.
So no doubt that's why they priced their first computer at $666.
Yeah.
My greatest regret, I'll never forget it. It was like 2014. If you follow my blog, I take screen captures of mainstream media and decode it. I was in the middle of taking a screenshot and CNN's page refreshed, and then it wasn't there anymore. I was so mad because the headline was, I can't remember who said it. I was just so mad because the story was completely off the front page. But it was some guy, and they just had it in bigger letters than they normally do, about how the computer is the beast system or something like that, just across the front page of their screen. Oh, I'm so mad that I didn't quite. I was just like a split second from releasing the screen capture to get it. But it probably is an AI that's mapping out all this, and I'm sure you guys have seen the videos before where showing how all of the news stations across the nation, every newscaster's reading off the same phrase. It's just like if you have the AI and it's carrying out the agenda for the day or what needs to be done, and then you got your henchmen just follow it. I see it as the same type of thing. So.
Zach, would this worry you if you had met both the Clintons, both the Bushes, Reagan, McCain, and Donald Trump? Would that bother you?
Well, I see what you're saying because you've had this life experience. If you haven't been over to their houses for dinner, I'd assume you're okay. So.
Yeah, I have not been to their houses for dinner, but I was just talking with a friend today, and that started creeping me out a little bit.
I understand why, but it seems like you're on the right path. It's obviously they didn't, you're looking for truth, so I think you're probably okay.
Yeah, no, I think all of us are. And, honestly, dude, this has been absolutely amazing. We got to have you come back on the show again. We can go deeper, but definitely.
And we could talk about the Georgia Guidestone sometime, Zach. I've been there. I've got a bunch of pictures. Maybe after you go, or we could just look at the pictures and kind of go through them as well.
Well, let's just all go back. We'll just have a big trip and we'll all go back there together and check it out. But
dude, it is on the way to nowhere. You got to really want to get to those damn Guidestones because it is not easy and it is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's like you go by on Stone Mountain and stuff. I've actually not been there, but I have a bunch of friends because I have a lot of family in that area.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's but what was I just going to say to you about what you were saying? Oh, definitely make sure that you get the Ike book because even as a previous student of Ike, as you are, he's added a lot of new stuff in there. And he does have, in my opinion, a really good message. It's not like all doom and gloom at all towards the end, which is kind of surprised me because I figured that's where he was going to end up going with it. But a lot of people are waking up, dude. There's a lot more people waking up than we actually believe, even though in our little echo chambers, we kind of sometimes think that there isn't because so many people are asleep.
Right.
But Zach, somebody in the chat room right now is talking about horrific Alex or the quarterback Smith, I forget his first name right now, his injury, 33 years to the day from Theismann's injury. And you apply a lot of gematria to sports as well, don't you?
Absolutely.
Talk about that. So is every single game, both college and professional, is it all fixed? Every single game?
I'm not going to say that every college game is. The big ones are, no doubt. If there's Vegas gambling on it, it's fixed. And we've proven that very thoroughly. The Alex Smith Theismann example is a great thing to talk about because that happened on the 322nd day of the year. And the man laying on top of Alex Smith was J.J. Watt, whose birthday is March 22nd.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Yes way. So what's awesome about that is this happened November 18th, the 322nd day of the year, leaving 43 days remaining. If you write out Yale, which is the alphabetic order, Y's 25, A's 1, L's 12, E's 5, Yale's 43. And think about how number 43 was Bush, who went to Yale. For people who don't know, American football is credited to Walter Camp, who went to Yale.
Right.
Was a Scottish Rite Freemason. He very well may have been in Skull and Bones. I don't know if he was or not. But in Gematria, Yale's 43, New Haven, CT's 43, where Yale is. Bush was number 43. Jeb Bush was the 43rd governor of Florida. His father was the 43rd vice president. Florida in Gematria, of course, sums to 43. I wish I could go back to high school and know this. I would have blown my teacher's mind. But anyway, so that happened. This injury to Alex Smith happened 33 years to the day of Joe Theismann, like you said. Both were members of the Washington Redskins. So it happened in 85 and then in 2018.
And Alex Smith wasn't a Washington Redskin until this season.
And he came from the Chiefs, and he used to play for the Utah Utes, who used to be called the Utah Redskins. So
it just gets deeper and deeper.
Honestly, mathematically, the permutations or the probability of that happening are beyond calculation.
Well, so somebody might say, like if I talk to my dad likes to chalk everything up to coincidence. He'd probably say, well, that could be a coincidence 33 years to the day.
Yeah, right.
But here's where it gets beyond coincidence. You can verify this. It's all true. They were both injured on the exact same hash mark on the field.
No way. Are you serious? I didn't even look at that.
Oh, we're just getting started, man. They both had the exact same amount of passing attempts on the season when their season ended. Both games, 33 years apart, finished with the exact same score, which was a sum of 44 points. The exact same score, a sum of 44 points. Broken legs, 44, right? And not only that, but you can look this up. Joe Theismann has a nephew who's 33 years old right now named Alex Smith. And I've been saying that it's a father-son thing in the world of sports. That's why a lot of these athletes, they claim to not know who the father is. It's because they don't want people to just see.
I got another one for you, Zach. I just thought of. Lawrence Taylor was number 56. That's 11. J.J. Watt is 99. Do that in Gematria. What do you got? 9-11.
So you just beat me to where I'm going. So
sorry.
No, it's good. I'm glad you did that. So, okay. Lawrence Taylor broke Joe Theismann's leg. J.J. Watt was on top of Alex Smith, right? Now, here's what's crazy. Earlier, we talked about Genesis 3:22. It's the 78th verse of the Bible. Genesis, with just the alphabetic order, is 78, right? And from the date of Joe Theismann's leg being broken to Lawrence Taylor's birthday, and again, this happened on the 322nd day of the year, from the date of the injury to Lawrence Taylor's birthday is 78 days later. Do you want to guess what J.J. Watt equals in Gematria? It equals 78.
Oh, my God.
So, and plus his birthday is March 22nd. And, 322. 322nd day of the year. It's just like, okay. So, what I started to say is, did his leg really break? Because if you watch the instant replay, you can see that his leg looks like a limp noodle. But you can look this up. There's a headline out there. I forget who put it out, USA Today or something. The headline is, people only saw Alex Smith's leg break in replay. And, I mean, we do live in the age of Photoshop and video editing. Did his leg really break? Or is it a video edit to, make it look like his leg broke?
Okay, so question, because you asked this, and I'm buying with what you're saying. I'm going along with it. It's much easier to manipulate and fake everything. So how do you get Alex Smith to go along with the game? Do you incentivize him with millions of dollars? Do you kill him and replace him with a clone? I mean, what is going on that you get these people to play this game?
Think about Alex Smith was the #1 draft pick. #1 draft picks that are QBs, you know, start out with tons of money in their pocket. He's on multiple contracts now. He's 34 years old, coming up on 35. That's relatively old for an NFL.
He doesn't need to take any more sacks.
He's done.
And that guy, I mean, Alex Smith has taken a lot of big hits in his NFL career. He got thrown into the 49ers. He got fed to the Wolves. That team had no offensive line. He's probably taken more big hits than any QB in the league.
Right.
And that's the thing. I mean, you can go back. There's YouTube clips of Alex Smith getting lit up as a 49er. That guy's a tough guy. I got to give it to him, man. I mean, he has really gotten rocked a lot in his career, and he gets right back up almost every time. And his tackle that broke his leg, it wasn't really that bad of a tackle. So that's like, that's the one that broke his leg? I mean.
Wow.
Zach, are you of the opinion that his leg may not have been broken and it may be just part of the code to bring this all together and show us yet again who's in charge?
I am of that opinion, but I will also say that I don't know officially what happened. Again, there is a dark half to Kabbalah where supposedly you're able to cast magic that really hurts people. Yeah. Being an open-minded person, I'll say maybe there's a guy in the stands who's the master of this craft. And
that's what I was going to ask you.
So I would say that's possible. And I explained that in a live stream a couple of weeks ago. And I had a bunch of people say, Zach, you're being so silly right now. But I say, okay, call it silly if you want. But I'm an open-minded person. I don't know what the extent of this code goes to.
Well, Zach, we know that they hire dark magicians at all the highest level companies in the world. Yeah. All the Fortune 50 have dark magicians, dude.
Right.
And there's a big article today that Smith has got a bad infection in his leg now, supposedly.
That's interesting.
It is interesting.
So, Zach, who do you think there is, for, you know, these Masons, these Illuminati, these secret societies, all the offshoots? It seems like, you know, Jeff, you did a video earlier today. If all of the Elohim are rat bastards, seems like it. I mean, who is the puppeteer? I mean, that's the question. I think that's the last question that all of us really have. Is it an AI, the Archons? Is it, you know, some sort of a demon, you know, demonic Anunnaki, Anu, you know, whatever, king, master? I mean, it's just, I wish we could that's the last question I feel like we have. We just can't figure out who's the puppeteer.
Well, it might be one of those things that we're not to know. If I told you I knew, I'd be lying. I don't know. I'm after those kind of answers as well. I don't know if I'll ever recover them. You know, some people say it's the fallen angels that came down in Mount Hermon, commanded by Satan. Some people say it's the Anunnaki.
Right.
You know, it's reptilians. There's all these competing theories. Is it a human? Is it a man who's at the top of the occult? You know,
the architect from the Matrix.
It'd have to be Rain Man to put this all together.
It would be. So I don't have the answer. I don't know, but it does definitely feel spiritual and dark.
It does.
It's spiritual. It's spiritual.
To go back to
Zach, if somebody's interested in Gematria and they want to, if not following your footsteps, they want to get a better grasp on it, tell them how to get your book and give them some advice for people that are very interested in this. What can they practically do 1, 2, 3 to learn more about it, if you don't mind?
Sure. So I did write my book for a beginner, and I pretty much put my 5 years of research into that book to get anybody who's brand new to the study up to speed. And the reason it's priced at $5, I'd have it priced for free if I could. I did this research for free for 5 years until I exhausted all my own savings. But I got to get some revenue coming in to pay the bills. You know, we're all living under this money system. But
we are.
If you pick up the book and it starts with, why are there 26 letters in the English alphabet? It'll blow your mind. From there, the next chapter, it teaches you how to use the 4 base ciphers, which I touched on earlier. And just chapter by chapter, I just build your knowledge, where this comes from, why it's relevant, how it's been used throughout history up to the present. And if you research the book and you apply it and you take notes, you'll have the tools to start decoding. And again, I always tell people, just pay attention to the number 47. You'll see how often 47 shows up in the headlines once you're aware of it. It's like Building 7 that fell on 9/11. It was 47 floors tall, each floor 47,000 square feet.
747 planes.
Yep, it's a really special number. Osama bin Laden equals 47. Anyway, if you read the book, if you read those, you said you're 60 pages into it. If you've read 60 pages into the book, you're already going to be a world ahead. You've probably read enough to move forward and just start picking up on patterns right away in the media.
Yep. I think I know him. I think most of us know, dude. I really do. I mean, there's some people that are still hornswoggled by, religion and politics and nonsense, but most of our watchers or people that view us are kind of clued in.
Hornswoggle is a word you don't hear often.
You what? Hornswoggle?
Hornswoggle is a word you don't hear often.
That's a big obstacle in this world because a lot of people are Christian and they have, they know the verses that say, hey, you're pretty much supposed to stay away from the numbers. But remember, knowledge is power, and knowing your enemy is important and how they operate. And that's why I educate about this knowledge. I have a ton of people that think I'm evil because I teach about this. And I'm saying, look, I'm trying to expose evil. I'm not trying to indoctrinate you to evil or make you change your spiritual beliefs. I'm just trying to show you what these world elite are doing in this world. And it's everything from, creating propaganda in your news to rigging your elections. If anybody looks at the top headline right now, the Democrats just claimed their 40th seat. I could tell you a million things about that. Just run the politician who runs name. His name sums to 173 using the alphabetic order. That's the 40th prime number. And there's a whole lot more to it. But everything that is done in Washington, D.C. is by this code. Your propaganda and your media is contrived every day by this code. 9/11 on 9/11, not an accident. That was the first big seed that got me following this path. And you'll even see that people are being murdered by this code, like Paul Walker. His death on this date was foreshadowing for what was coming for HW. He died 79 days after his own birthday. Murder equals 79. HW just died on a date with 79 numerology. Again, you just learn these simple codes, which are explained very clearly in the book. You'll see how they come up again and again and again and again throughout history. Everything that I wrote about in that book that was released in March, it's played itself out, 100 times more over for each chapter since I released it. I could write a whole new book just as long, just based on what happened this year.
So what's the name of the book, Zach?
Zach, do you have any predictions of anything short term before we let you go, like that's coming in the next 6 to 9 months to a year that you see?
And give us the name of your book first, please.
Okay. Letters and Numbers. Very generic title because that's what it is. It's letters and numbers. If you go to Etsy, ETSY, 4-letter name, Etsy.com. It's an arts and crafts website. I sold it there because my mom sold wreaths there for years. It's an instant download. You're welcome to print it. You're welcome to send it to lulu.com and turn it into a real book. But it's the best way I can distribute the book for $5 in its entirety that you can get it instantly. Etsy.com, search letters and numbers in their search bar. You'll see a bright green cover. You'll see a whole bunch of positive reviews. You'll see my mug up there with some sunglasses on. That's the book. It's got a bright green neon cover. I made it that color so it stands out. Letters and Numbers.
Guys, please support Zach's work. Like I said, I've read 60 pages. The book is a page turner. You will not stop. It's very easy to read. It's very lay. Support the work, please. But go ahead and tell us about what you think is coming.
Sure. So I've told everybody, and just before I say this, I make a lot of predictions that land. Like I told everybody to circle the date of the weekend, October 1st, 2017. I said we'll see the biggest false flag in the United States since 9/11. That ended up being the Vegas shooting. And I've called a whole lot of things since then and before then. But I put out a similar prediction in the beginning of September of this year. I said circle August 11th, 2019. I have to talk to you. I can come back on and explain everything that
sure, we will have you back on for sure.
August 11th, 2019 is Tisha B'Av for the upcoming year. Again, that's to remember the destruction of the two temples. It's part of the prophecy of the third temple, Tisha B'Av. Right now, there's a coin for sale with Donald Trump and King Cyrus on one side and the third temple on the other. It's a shekel that went on sale in Israel on the 102nd day of the year. Israel or shekel equals 102.
Hello, Donald Trump.
Right.
Zionists.
So check this out. Tisha B'Av, again, is to remember the destruction of the two temples. It falls on August 11th, 2019. That's going to be a date with 58 numerology. Trump is the winner of the 58th U.S. presidential election. He announced he was running from the 58-story Trump Tower. He hired the 58-year-old Steve Ray for Inauguration Day, which fell on a date with 58 numerology. From Trump's birthday to August 11th, 2019 is 58 days later. Now, here's the trip. In Gematria, Solomon's temple equals 58, Herod's temple equals 58, Third temple equals 58, Freemasonry 58, Secret Society 58.
Jeff, need any more evidence?
Wow.
August 11th, this was before I was saying the death, or this is before Herbert Walker died, but I was talking about this at the same time I was talking about why Herbert Walker is going to die. Remember, George Herbert Walker Bush equals 118. Donald Trump was at the site of the Western Wall where they planned to build the Third Temple May 22nd, 2017. From that day to August 11th, 2019 is 811 days later. 811, like how we write August 11th, 8/11, also the reflection of 118. The other thing about May 22nd is it's the reflection of August 11th because May 22nd is the 142nd day of the year, leaving 223 days remaining. August 11th, the 223rd day of the year, leaving 142 days remaining. And think about 223. It is the reflection of 322. The name for the false Jews from the Bible is the synagogue of Satan, which equals 223. And there's a million more things to this date. There's just so many things to it. It starts with the prophecy of the red heifer, this cow that was supposedly born on the day, leaving 118 days left in the year. It connects to the mayor of San Francisco who just replaced the Ed Lee who dropped dead from a heart attack out of nowhere. The prophecy is that in the time of the Third Temple coming to being, the Jewish Messiah will arrive that will rule over the world, and the Jewish Messiah will arrive through the Golden Gate. What's a trip about that is
Golden Gate.
The San Francisco mayor, she's the 45th mayor of San Francisco. She's going to turn 45 years old on August 11th, 2019. And Golden Gate sums to 45, like Holy Bible, like Trump being the winner of the 45th U.S. presidential election. This prophecy is connected to Revelation, where the warning in Revelation is the trumpets, which has to remind everybody of the trumpets.
Yes, trumpets.
Trumpets, yeah.
So, and I just told you the tip of the iceberg for this August 11th riddle.
So what do you think it's going to be? Something in San Francisco coming through the Golden Gate, or is it financial collapse? It's just more symbology.
So, look, I mean, if they're going to do something to the Golden Gate Bridge, the only way that I see they could do it is with a man-made disaster that's not really man-made. And
a tactical nuke, right.
The Bay Area is known for earthquakes. Hey, for people out there, real quick, here's a kicker. The great San Francisco earthquake during the World Series, the Bay Area quake,
sure.
Oakland versus San Francisco.
7.1. Yep.
The last thing shown on television before that earthquake began was the replay of Jose Canseco crossing home plate from the game prior. The earthquake was just prior to the game starting. They were showing the replay on TV from the night prior. Jose Canseco crosses the plate. He pumps his fist, and then the broadcast cuts out. It goes to fuzz because of the earthquake. Mm-hmm. What's awesome is if you measure from Jose Canseco's birthday to the earthquake, it's 107 days later. His full name equals 107, and earthquake equals 107, just like military. And the day of HW's death, we had the massive earthquake in Alaska. That was in Cook Inlet, the epicenter, which equals 41. It shook Anchorage, which is on the 149th meridian. This might be too much for people, but Skull and Bones, earlier we talked about how it equals 41 with the alphabetic order and rules of numerology. If you just use the alphabetic order, Skull and Bones sums to 149. Anchorage is on the 149th meridian.
Zach, guess what number Jose Canseco wore?
44.
33.
Oh, 33. My bad.
Oh, of course he did. Perfect. We know who loves that number. So that was the last thing on the screen before it went to fuzz. This San Francisco quake, Anchorage in Gematria sums to 171, and Bush died on his 171st day of his age. The Hart facility is in Alaska, which came into being in 93, the same year Bush left office. And again, that's another big number with him too. A lot of people know that Barbara Bush, or it's assumed that Barbara Bush is the daughter of Aleister Crowley, who worshiped the number 93. Bush himself was 93 when Barbara died this year. Barbara Bush equals 93. Barbara Bush Jr., his granddaughter, just got married 93 days after George W. Bush's birthday. And she also got married on the 118th day of George Herbert Walker Bush. Anyway, we could go on forever, you guys. I know you got to wrap it up, but I do think that they might do something to San Francisco on that day. And I'm also wondering if they might do something in that area of the world, because August 11th, 2019 is also the Muslim Day of Sacrifice on their calendar. And it's also the time of the Hajj, when the Muslims are making the great pilgrimage to
Mecca.
So, and we've all heard the prophecy of Albert Pike and the Third World War against Islam, essentially. And not Donald Trump, but Mr. Herbert Walker Bush, Mr. New World Order, who gave a speech September 11th, 1990, 11 years to the day of the big event that got the ball rolling for the latest intervention in the Middle East. So there's just so much. I'll tell you one last thing. From Bush's death to August 11th, 2019 is 254 days later. The reason that matters is because September 11th is the 254th day of the year. And I've been saying that date's going to be the next 9/11. So
that is fascinating stuff, Zach. We definitely need to have you back.
Yeah, we will.
Zach's book, Letters and Numbers. It's on Etsy. Bright green cover, his face, sunglasses. I'll be doing it just as soon as this broadcast wraps up. We've had a lot of good shows, Jay, but this rate's right up there at the top of them. Zach, thanks so much for being with us.
He's so well researched, dude. You're the man. Let me just shameless plug.
We're wrapping it up, Jay.
I'm not shameless. Until 12 o'clock tomorrow, if you're a U.S. serviceman, fireman, law enforcement, even if you do EMT, and you send an email to me at service@trtrevolution.com, I give you all my books and everything I've done. It's a lot of money's worth of stuff. So if you guys know somebody in the service community, please email me and I will send them to them. Nothing can improve their health better than Optimized Life.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, stay put if you would for 1 second so I can say goodbye to you personally. For those of you in the chat room, the best chat room on YouTube, we do appreciate you very much. We are the last generation of real humans. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ourselves together and let's get busy.